Hello everyone, my name is John, I'm 36 years old, and what I'm going to tell you today still keeps me awake at night. It happened 2 years ago, but it feels like yesterday. Some people will think I'm making this up, others will think I've gone crazy, but I need to get this off my chest. I need to lift this weight because, honestly, I can't bear carrying this story alone anymore. I've always been a skeptical person, you know? I never believed in supernatural things, inexplicable mysteries, none of that. I'm a software engineer, I work with logic, data, code. My life has always been very rational. But what happened to me completely changed my perspective on reality. It all started when I moved to a new apartment. It was an old building but well-maintained in a quiet neighborhood. The apartment was perfect for me, 2 bedrooms, a spacious living room with a beautiful view, and the price was within my budget. The realtor told me the apartment had been vacant for almost a year, which surprised me because it was really an excellent place. In the first few days, everything went normally. I was excited about the move, arranging things, getting to know the neighbors. The building had only 8 apartments, so it was quite intimate. The neighbors were nice people. There was an elderly couple on the ground floor, a family with 2 small children on the second floor, and some young professionals like me on the other floors. It was in the 3rd week that I started noticing something strange. I work from home a few times a week, and during those days, always around 3 in the afternoon, I would hear footsteps in the hallway. They weren't normal footsteps, you understand? It was as if someone was walking very slowly, almost dragging their feet. The sound came from the hallway and stopped exactly in front of my door. At first, I thought it was some neighbor coming home, maybe carrying heavy groceries or something like that. But the strange thing was that I never heard any apartment door open or close after those footsteps. It was as if the person simply stopped there and disappeared. I started getting curious. The 5th time I heard the footsteps, I decided to go to the door and look through the peephole. My heart raced when I saw what was on the other side. There was a man standing right in front of my door, but folks, I know this is going to sound absurd, but he had no face. Where the face should have been, there was only a smooth surface, like a blank screen. I froze, looking through that little hole. The man was wearing a dark suit, well-tailored, impeccable dress shoes, but where his face should have been, there was just nothing. He stood there for about 5 minutes, completely motionless, and then simply turned and left my field of vision. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept wondering if I was going crazy, if work stress was making me see things. I decided that next time, I would open the door and confront whatever that was. The footsteps returned the next day at the same time. 3 o'clock sharp. This time, I waited until the footsteps stopped in front of my door and, taking a deep breath, opened it quickly. The hallway was completely empty. There was no one. I went out and looked everywhere, checked if any door was open, if there was anyone on the stairs. Nothing. It was as if the person had simply evaporated. I started questioning my own sanity. I made an appointment with a doctor, did some tests, everything was normal. Talking to the doctor, he suggested I might be suffering from hallucinations caused by the stress of moving, change of routine, these things. I kind of convinced myself that was it. But then, something even more disturbing happened. It was a Friday night, I was watching a movie in the living room when I heard a knock on the door. It wasn't the usual slow footsteps, it was a normal knock, as if someone wanted to talk to me. I looked at the clock, 11:47 p.m. Who would knock on my door at this hour? I went to the door and looked through the peephole. It was him again. The faceless man. But this time, he wasn't just standing there. He was, how can I explain, he was looking directly at the peephole, as if he knew I was watching. Even without having eyes, I felt like he was seeing me. My blood ran cold. I stood there, trying to process what was happening. And then, folks, something happened that marked me deeply. I heard a voice. It wasn't a normal voice, coming from the hallway. It was as if the voice was inside my head, but I knew it wasn't my thoughts. The voice said, "John, you need to discover who I am." I almost fainted. How did this thing know my name? I ran away from the door, went to the bedroom and locked myself in there. I spent the entire night awake, listening to any noise, any sound that could indicate that thing was still around. The next day, I was determined to find out what was happening. I went to talk to the neighbors, asking if anyone had noticed anything strange in the building, if they knew someone who always dressed in a dark suit. The lady from the ground floor, Mrs. Helena, looked at me with a strange expression when I asked these questions. "Have you been seeing something different, my child?" she asked, with a worried tone. I decided to be direct with her. I told her about the footsteps, about the faceless man. I expected her to think I was crazy, but her reaction surprised me completely. "I knew this was going to happen again," she murmured, shaking her head. "That's why the apartment stayed empty for so long." Mrs. Helena invited me in and told me a story that changed everything. About 3 years ago, the apartment where I live was occupied by a man named Marcus. He was a very reserved person, worked as a financial consultant and rarely talked to the neighbors. Marcus always dressed impeccably, always in a dark suit, and had a very rigid routine. One day Marcus simply disappeared. He didn't tell anyone, didn't leave any message, didn't take his things. The apartment remained exactly as it was, with all his belongings, clothes, documents. His relatives, apparently he had no close family, eventually came to get the belongings, but no one ever knew what happened to him. But the strange thing, continued Mrs. Helena, is that after he disappeared, some neighbors started reporting weird things. Footsteps in the hallway, a figure in a suit walking through the corridors. The last tenant before you lasted only 2 months. He said he felt like he was being watched all the time. My mind was racing. I asked if she had any photo of Marcus, anything that could help me understand what was happening. She went to an old album and showed me a photo from the building's last Christmas party. There was Marcus, a tall man, in a dark suit, but in the photo, where his face should have been, there was only a blur, as if the image was damaged exactly at that point. How strange," said Mrs. Helena, looking at the photo. "This photo has always been like this. I thought it was a development defect, but all the photos I have of him have this same problem." I left there even more confused and scared. I started researching Marcus on the internet, social media, anything that could give me clues about who he was and what had happened to him. And that's when I discovered something disturbing. Marcus didn't exist. At least not officially. I couldn't find records of him anywhere. There were no social media profiles, no professional history, nothing. It was as if he had never really existed. But how was this possible? Mrs. Helena clearly remembered him, other neighbors too. That night, I decided to stay awake and wait. If the faceless man was really Marcus, or what was left of him, I needed to find out what he wanted with me. At 3 in the morning, the footsteps returned. This time, they didn't seem to come from the hallway. They seemed to come from inside the apartment itself. I got up slowly from bed and followed the sound. The footsteps were coming from the living room. When I got there, I saw something that made me completely question my understanding of reality. The faceless man was sitting on my couch, as if he was waiting for me. This time I didn't feel fear. I felt a deep sadness, as if I could feel that being's pain. I approached slowly and sat in the armchair in front of him. "Marcus?" I asked in a low voice. The voice sounded in my head again, "You need to help me remember who I am." That's when everything started to make sense. Marcus wasn't haunting the apartment. He was trapped there, lost between existing and not existing, trying to recover his identity, his memories, his own face. In the days that followed, I established a strange routine with Marcus. Every night, he would appear, and I would try to help him recover fragments of his memory. It was a painful process, because I felt his emotions as if they were mine. The confusion, the despair, the feeling of being lost in a limbo between life and death. Through these sessions, I discovered that Marcus had been a very lonely person in life. He had no close friends, no family, lived only for work. His existence had been so empty of significant human connections that when he died, I still didn't know how, his identity simply began to unravel. But what shocked me most was discovering that Marcus had not died naturally. On one of those nights, he managed to show me fragmented images of his last moments. He was in the apartment, working late as always, when someone knocked on the door. It was late at night, just like when he had appeared to me for the first time. Marcus opened the door and saw a man he knew, someone from work, a partner in some project. They argued about money, about a fraudulent scheme that Marcus had discovered and threatened to report. The argument escalated, there was a fight, and Marcus was pushed, hitting his head on the glass table in the living room. The man panicked, cleaned the scene, took Marcus's body and made it seem like he had simply disappeared. But something in the apartment, perhaps the residual energy of the trauma, or perhaps the fact that Marcus died without resolving his pending affairs, made part of his consciousness trapped there. That night, after seeing those images, I asked Marcus, "Do you want justice?" The answer came immediately, "I just want peace. But first, I need to remember completely who I am." That's when I had an idea. If Marcus was losing his identity because he had no significant connections in life, maybe I could help him by creating one. I started talking to him every night, not just trying to help him remember the past, but creating new memories, new experiences. I told him about my life, my fears, my dreams. I talked about movies I liked, books I had read, places I wanted to visit. And gradually, Marcus began to respond, not just with fragmented memories, but with opinions, with curiosity, with humor. And something incredible started to happen. Each night, I could see more details of his face. First the contours appeared, then the eyes, the nose, the mouth. It was as if, by forming a genuine human connection, he was recovering his humanity. This process lasted about 3 months. They were intense 3 months, where I practically lived 2 lives, mine during the day, and Marcus's during the night. I was helping someone rediscover their identity, but in the process, I was also discovering things about myself that I had never noticed. On the last night Marcus appeared, his face was completely formed. He was a man of gentle appearance with intelligent eyes and a sad smile. We talked for hours like 2 old friends. "John," he said, and this time his voice sounded real, came from his mouth, no longer from my head. "Thank you for helping me remember who I am. Thank you for giving me something I never had in life, a true friendship." "Will everything be okay now?" I asked. "Yes," he replied. "Now I can rest. But first, you need to know something important." Marcus told me the name of the man who killed him and where he had hidden his body. He said I should decide what to do with this information, but that now he could depart in peace, regardless of my choice. "One last thing," he said, standing up. "You gave me something precious, so I want to give you something in return. You're afraid of not being enough, of not making a difference in the world. But you made a difference in my existence even though I was dead. That means more than you imagine. Don't underestimate yourself, John. You have a gift for connecting with people, for truly seeing them. Use that." And then Marcus disappeared. Not in a scary or dramatic way. He simply smiled, waved, and faded away like a dream at dawn. The next day, I called the police and anonymously reported the information Marcus had given me. A week later, I saw on the news that a man had been arrested for murder, and that a body had been found exactly where Marcus said it would be. I never saw Marcus again after that night. The apartment returned to normal, the footsteps in the hallway ceased, and everything was at peace. But the experience completely changed my life. I realized that I had spent years of my life avoiding deep connections with people, hiding behind work and routine. Marcus showed me what happens when we live completely isolated, when we don't allow anyone to really know us. I started opening up more to friends, making new relationships, seeking activities that connected me with other people. I even met someone special, a person with whom I intend to build something serious. And you know what's most interesting? Sometimes, when I'm helping someone who's going through a difficult time, or when I make a real connection with a person, I feel as if Marcus is there, approving, satisfied to see that his words weren't in vain. Some people will say I made all this up, that it was a product of my imagination or some psychological disorder. Maybe they're right. Maybe Marcus was just a projection of my own loneliness, a way for my subconscious to teach me about the importance of human connections. But I know what I saw, I know what I felt, and I know how this experience transformed me. Regardless of whether Marcus was real or not, the lesson I learned was very real. We are social beings, we need each other, and when we allow people to really see us and know us, we find not only meaning, but also a form of immortality through the memories and impact we cause in others' lives. The faceless man taught me that all of us, in a way, are invisible until someone cares enough to really see us. And when that happens, our true face appears, our humanity reveals itself, and we find our place in the world. Today, whenever I pass by someone who seems lonely or lost, I remember Marcus's words and make sure to offer a smile, a conversation, a genuine human connection. Because we never know when we might be the person who helps someone rediscover their own face, their own identity, their own worth. And that, folks, is the story of the faceless man. A story about loneliness, connection, and about how sometimes the most inexplicable experiences teach us the most important lessons about what it means to be human. Thank you for listening to me until here. I know it sounds crazy, but I needed to share this with someone. And who knows, maybe some of you watching are also feeling a little invisible, a little faceless. If that's the case, remember, you are seen, you matter, and there's always someone willing to see who you really are. Until next time.